Hello, and welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
The fuck am I supposed to do with that?
I thought I'd throw you a curveball this week. It's me, everyone. It's Jackson Keller, at your service.
Well, welcome back, Jack. See, you've fucking thrown off the whole mojo of this whole thing from the word go. What the fuck is wrong with you?
I have to ensure that we never have a good podcast intro.
You know what? Honestly, that's fair. We don't want new listeners. We would actively are trying to repel people from listening to our podcast. So
we're a cut above from the rest. We need to filter out plebs, so only the real intellectual galaxy brains listen to our great content.
Obviously. So basically, what I'm saying here is everyone who found this on Reddit, on Twitter, who turned it on to listen to the first minute to see if they're worth listening to. That was the first minute. Goodbye. So let's talk about the actual movie now that we've separated the wheat from the chaff.
Fuck intros. We're here to talk about Tarantino. He's non-chronological sometimes.
Okay. I really don't know what you're going. You're bringing a very weird energy to this one. So I'm just gonna take it back from you. We're here to talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a Quentin Tarantino film. Jackson, you're very familiar with Quentin Tarantino's works. Did you enjoy Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Why, yes, Sean, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. So as to qualify, I'm by no means Quentin Tarantino expert. I have not seen all of his films. I've seen a good chunk of them. But I really like them. I really like them a lot. I think he's a great filmmaker. I think that he's an artist whose growth across time has been very interesting to track. I think that each one of his movies, despite sharing the common themes, the common Tarantino-isms, the common aesthetics, I think that they all go interesting new places. And I think that this is a somewhat against the grain opinion. I think he's only gotten better with age. I know a lot of people don't like Hateful Eight, but Hateful Eight's probably my favorite Tarantino movie.
I mean, I will say, just as a quick aside, the general reaction has been that this is like his Magnum Opus so far.
Really? I've seen a few more mixed things, but well, yeah. So either way, I'm definitely more in that camp. I don't know if I'd call it his best movie. I've been really sort of wrestling with my reaction because I walked out of the theater.
You might call it a Magnum Nopus.
And you said I was the one bringing bad energy to this. Shame on you.
Honestly fair. I will see myself out.
So now that Sean's gone, the big boys can talk about movies. Tarantino. I wrestled with my reaction to this one quite a bit. I liked it. I didn't know if I loved it upon exiting the theater. It's not as like hype as something like Reservoir Dogs or Django, movies that basically live completely on hype. Nor is it as like gritty or ugly as Hateful Eight was, which is what I really liked about that movie. It doesn't have quite the same explosiveness that a lot of his other movies do. Very, very light on the violence for Tarantino, which I think plays a big part of it. And so, but it's a movie that the more that I think about it, the more that I like it, and I keep thinking about little moments that have really stuck with me and like play into the big picture in a really clever way. It's a nearly 3-hour-long movie, and I felt it go by way faster than a lot of the hour-and-a-half movies we've watched recently. Unlike, I mean, this is a nice like parallel to Lion King last week, which, as you recall, was the first movie I ever walked out of. This movie, I was thinking about it so much that today, before we started recording, I was tempted to go see it again, but just didn't quite have the time. So yeah, overall, really great. I thoroughly enjoyed this. All right, Sean, you can come back now.
Oh, okay. Thank you for welcoming me back into the call. I am Sean McKinda, and I would like to first start by offering a tearful apology. I realized that in my last entry, I have disappointed a number of my fans, and regret to inform you that I'm probably going to disappoint more people, just because I have never watched a Quentin Tarantino film before this one. I had only seen From Dusk Till Dawn, which is not strictly speaking a Quentin Tarantino film, despite him being in it, and I'm pretty sure he's got a producer credit or something on it. So that's the only real experience I've had with Tarantino outside of this film. And so walking out of this film being deflowered from Quentin Tarantino's filmography, I was left not disappointed, but confused about the hype surrounding the man in general. I enjoyed the movie well enough. I thought there was a bunch of really cool stuff to it. The visuals were all really good. I enjoyed the cast, the crew, everything like that. But I don't know. I feel like the best way to put it is I'm not sold on Tarantino. I think for whatever reason, it might just be that I had hyped up the as I said, the man, the myth, the legend too much. And so, going into this, I didn't get, blown away in the way that I was expecting to. And instead was just kind of like, that was pretty good. I enjoyed it like Jackson. I was not bored for 3 hours. It flew by fairly quickly. There was one point that I looked at my phone, and we'll talk about that maybe later. If not, it's not a big deal. It's just a very Tarantino moment, and I wanted to check to make sure what I thought had happened. Other than that, though, yeah, it was nothing about it felt elevated from another. Like, there's good directors, and then there's godly directors. And Tarantino, in my vision of this movie, strictly speaking, falls onto the upper echelon of good directors. He doesn't quite make it into like my god tier directors.
I think that's a very fair reaction to have. Just based on this movie alone, I think what I like about this movie most is how much it resonates with kind of the Tarantino mythos that he's built up around himself, and also just the contrast between his usual fare, because it's very different from most of his other movies. I have not seen Jackie Brown. I've heard that one's also kind of low key. But like, especially his more recent movies are like really fucking crazy. And, this is the man who made like, Django and Kill Bill. Subtlety of presentation and personal feelings and emotion aren't exactly the hallmark of what Tarantino is about, but this one is a lot more about like kind of personal feelings, which I think makes it very interesting to contrast, and since it's so much about commentating on movies, because every fucking Tarantino movie comments on movies in some way. I think it works really well, but definitely. So the thing about Tarantino movies is that they are smart and well written, but not in the way that you would expect. They're not like, some of them have more depth than others, but especially his more recent works, I think, have been more interested in themes. But if you go to like the early Tarantino, like the iconic stuff, like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, there definitely is kind of a style over substance and a real like ego to them, like a real sensation of like, I'm a fucking maniac who spends his entire life watching movies. I can make a better, more exciting movie than anyone on the planet, and I'm going to show you how it's done. And there's this real bravado to especially like those early kind of gangster movies. Now, as he's gone on, starting with like Probably about Bastards, although like I said, I haven't seen Jackie Brown, which is also known for being one of his more like low-key ones. But like, starting with Bastards and then, followed by Django and Hateful Eight, there's more of an effort to make commentary and like examine themes and put some more substance with the style, perhaps. And so as far as the style goes, there are definitely a lot of Tarantino isms, but this one's very pulled back. Not just in the violence, but especially compared to like Pulp Fiction, for example, is probably like the peak Tarantino movie. Not necessarily because it's the best written from like a story like theme standpoint, but just that it is like the hallmark of the Tarantino style of like the non-linear like structure, how kind of episodic it is, and just all the memorable scenes and moments and quotes and stuff. Tarantino films in general, they're very chaotic and almost episodic in a lot of ways, and so much more kind of about putting together a bunch of cool shit more so than coalescing into a central thesis, which is why I think I like some of his more recent stuff, like Bastards and Django and Hateful Eight, because there is more of a concern for making those things coalesce. But generally, I think especially with his early films, like when we're talking the Tarantino style and like what makes him stand out as a director, that's kind of what we're talking about. And I think part of it is just that like Tarantino's been such an influential director that take like Bad Times, right, that's very similar in terms of being, kind of style over substance, like flashy kind of gangster movie aesthetic. And that's a really good movie in its own right. I like that movie a lot. But I definitely, like, when I was watching that, I definitely got kind of a Tarantino light feel from it. And I think that's just part of it. Like, you can name all different kinds of movies that have been pulling from like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And so I think that also maybe makes this movie weirdly more resonant, since it's so concerned with like meditating about where like Tarantino is kind of, someone who was known for being like this fresh, young, independent voice is now like very much one of the old guard. I think that's something like interesting to reckon with too. So yeah, on the meta level, I think this movie works really well, but if, you're not invested in the Tarantino narrative, then like, why would you care? So I think it makes sense that like this would definitely not be, if you've never seen a Tarantino, I wouldn't recommend this to be your first Tarantino movie or even your second or third. Like I think people who are invested are going to get so much more out of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I definitely saw the themes. I saw what Tarantino was trying to say and do. I couldn't bring myself far enough to care, I guess. Like, it felt like such a faint, like, this is the theme of the movie. It's something that is similar to themes we've talked about in previous movies. And, I'm trying not to just be like, this is what it is. So it's weird as someone who is fresh-faced in the Tarantino universe, as being like, this is clearly deeply personal, and the themes, while resonant across, people, are very specific to me and my films. It doesn't quite fit in the way that I wanted it to. And as someone who, put Bad Times at the El Royale as their favorite movie of 2017, 2018, whenever that came out, that was 2018, I was expecting something more like that, but even more over the top, I guess. So, like, I was kind of locked out, like, all right, that happened. Neat.
Something like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction is definitely going to be more of a kind with Bad Times than this is. Not that this is completely dissimilar. The Tarantino-isms are still there. And so I think if I had to use one word to describe Tarantino's films,
it would be feet.
Feet adjacent, since we're talking about Tarantino, it would be masturbatory.
Oh my god, it really is feet adjacent.
Right? So Tarantino is basically like from a conventional filmmaking stance, what Tarantino does shouldn't work. Basically. He's based on like interviews and stuff, not that I'm equipped to make like a character psychological pronouncement on the man, but based on what I've seen from interviews, very arrogant, knows that he's great, just puts in entire scenes and moments basically because he feels like it. I mean, so it's very cool to see Leo spliced in and integrated naturally into footage from The Great Escape, but there's no real plot or theme reason to it other than look at this cool fucking thing I can do because I'm Quentin Tarantino, and that energy is the feeling that a lot of his films have, and so I think that it's strange because it's something. The Tarantino style, it really is if we're talking about cults, it really is almost like a cult. I feel like you get acclimated to it, you're into it, or you're not. And I think that there's completely understandable reasons to not be, but I find the way that he directs and makes his films very thrilling, which I think says a lot. Reservoir Dogs is probably up there with one of my favorite movies, even though it's really light on theme and that sort of thing, which I usually really prioritize. But it's just so fucking thrilling and exciting, and the way the directing tricks and the structure that he uses just make it a complete completely entrancing to watch. So yeah, it's definitely Tarantino is an artist in that he wants you to be thinking about him. He's gone very publicly vocal about his belief that similar to our Wind Rises kind of discussion about you have an artist engineer is 10 good years in him. Tarantino is very much of that mindset of I don't want to turn into a Francis Ford Coppola who makes The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 and peaks and never really does anything as great after that. I'm going to make 10 films and then I'm out. Then I'm going to retire so my legacy will be intact. Now, the merits of this mindset, you can debate whether or not. I certainly don't agree with him. For every Coppola, there's a Miyazaki or a Martin Scorsese who are making really great
Although
unique...
it sounds like even Miyazaki would disagree with you. Given the themes of The Wind Rises, am I right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I would hope Miyazaki disagrees with me. I mean, that dude's 75, isn't he? But so yeah, people can make great work through their 70s and 80s, even their 90s. Some people, and it's not really a black and white sort of thing. Some people do peak in their 30s. Other people do keep getting better and better and better, and their greatest work is unfinished when they died at 90. So whether or not that's true, neither here nor there, another conversation. But Tarantino very much believes it, and is very public about this being his penultimate film. And so I think that on the one hand, because Tarantino's movies are so masturbatory, that can turn off a lot of people. But once you accept it, and if you're kind of invested in it, I think that it makes those personal elements, especially here, all the stronger. Because this is a situation where you couldn't even attempt to remove the Tarantino from his movies. Like, if we're in the broader conversation about can you separate the art from the artist, on a Tarantino movie, that is definitively no.
Well, I want to just kind of say, like, those moments, like you talked about, you know, Leo and The Great Escape, I dug those moments. Like, there's a lot about this movie that I did really like. It just, like, the overarching themes and identity of it kind of left me meh. And I think that it does boil down more to just not understanding Tarantino as a filmmaker due to the fact that I haven't seen any of his other works. So I'm left kind of in a weird position, but I do want to take this moment to kind of to jump into spoilers, and we're going to jump into there to talk about masturbatoriness of Quentin Tarantino. But before we do, let's talk about what we're going to watch next week, which is in fact Hobbs and Shaw. Man, we just fucking like bounce back and forth from just mainstream guff trash to like, I want to make an art piece about myself in Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, what? We went from like, I mean, we've been on a real pattern. We did Midsummer, we did Lion King. I mean, we did Rogue One in between. That was a special thing. So it was like, you know, auteur piece, you know, big budget garbage, auteur piece, big budget. I mean, I'm not going to call it garbage. I haven't seen it. I, for one, am very excited to watch Hobbs and Shaw. I've never seen a Fast and the Furious movie. So this is going to be something else.
I was going to say, we're changing places because I've seen a bunch of the Fast and the Furious movies. So it should be a great time to talk about that. But we're not talking about that yet. We're still talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So let's talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I want to start spoilers by talking about feet, actually. Like I made this joke earlier, just because it is kind of like the meme. It's Quentin Tarantino and his feet. But I just want to talk about how upsetting isn't the right word, but unsettling, I think, is the word for how clearly this foot fetish pervades Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's one of those things where, like, I'm not here to kink shame him for it. I'm here to shame him for forcing it on the rest of the world in such a weird way. Like, there are scenes where I swear to God, it's so over fucking blown. It's insane. Charles Manson's whole ranch is barefoot people. And like that, sure, I can accept that. There's, you know, young, attractive people in their bare feet. You know what? Knock yourself out there, Quentin. Get them dirty feet all up in your film.
Oh, I'm gonna be sick.
But the part that's stranger to me is like there's just multiple scenes where main actresses just like are barefoot for no fucking reason with their feet up on movie theater seats, which if you ever take your shoes off in a movie theater and then put your feet up behind my head barefoot, I think I am legally allowed to kill you. I'm not sure on that one. I need to check the law, but I'm pretty sure I'm legally allowed to kill you. But like that was very weird. Like the staging of that looked bizarre because the way it was shot, it looked like she was like two separate people. One person sitting normally in a movie theater chair, and then the other person with just their feet up in the air, no body. But then like there's the girl who's in the cult who just sticks her dirty feet on the fucking windshield of his car, of Cliff's car, and I'm just like, you just want to look at feet smooshed on glass. Why? It's very weird as a Quentin Tarantino novice.
Yeah, I mean, the feet thing, it is a big meme. And so it's the perfect example, really, when we're talking about the masturbatory elements. And you know, not just in the literal sense, and that, like, you could even sense, like, this movie so up its own ass about, like, the meta. Like, it feels almost like a challenge to me.
Yeah.
It's like Schrodinger's foot. Like, yeah, I'm gonna put all these feet in. Is it because, like, I just want to see Margot Robbie's feet, or is it like a statement about like the tropes I employ? Like, your choice, motherfucker.
Honest to God, thinking that as I watched it, because like the first time I'm like, oh, it's his foot thing, whatever, and then it kept going and getting worse. I'm like, is this a fucking like challenge? Is a good word for it? Like, what the fuck is this?
It does accelerate, because like there are some shots of just like feet where like, yeah, okay, like, he's got his signature thing, like whatever, but then like it felt like every other scene after a point it was just like foot shot after foot shot after foot shot, and so you really can't tell. Like, it's really hard to say, because a reasonable case could be made that like, Margot Robbie's showing her feet because she's like basking in the glow of like her former Hollywood career that she's kind of given up, and like it fits with her character. You can make that case. But also Quentin Tarantino likes his feet.
Also,
so who can say?
Take your fucking bare feet out in the theater. Fuck you.
But so speaking, I guess speaking to a masturbatory element that I really liked, not the feet thing, a different element, because, so the thing about Quentin Tarantino is that so many of his movies, when they are interested in themes, are about movies, which I think is why Django and Hateful Eight are among the more interesting to me, just because like they're so much more concerned with like real shit, like, race relations and power structures and morality and all those things. But like taking Inglourious Bastards, for example, and that the subtext of Inglourious Bastards is basically movies are the greatest fucking thing. They're so good that we can use movies and art to defeat the Nazis, pretty much. Like, if you look at like all the cinematic techniques that are used in Bastards, that's kind of the main point. And that's an extremely masturbatory theme. However, as someone,
I'm so good, I can single-handedly defeat the Nazis with my art.
Right? However, as someone that does write books, I'm down to clown with this theme. I'm wanking right along with Quentin. I'm sitting there in a circle jerk with him, like, yeah, dude, let's fuck him up with our art. Yeah, brother. And that's kind of how I feel.
And then I'm over here being like, yeah, as a movie critic and media analyst, no one cares about a thing I have to say.
That's not true, Sean. I care. So yeah, that's a pretty inherently masturbatory theme, and it's something that writers like to write about a lot, obviously, because they're writers. So I think, though, that there are a lot of elements in this. I think Leo's character in particular is a real standout. Like, there isn't a character quite like him in other Tarantino movies. Like, the fact that he's so much more vulnerable and nervous. He's really the main thing that's a real departure. Like, most Tarantino characters are like, kind of smart-mouthed, like quick-witted, like gangsters or like stoic badasses, or like, more like archetypal. But Rick feels so much more like a human. And, like, his desires and, like, his fears are all very human. And I think this is, honestly, maybe one of my favorite Leo performances. And that, like, the scene where he kind of, like, gets over himself. And after, like, losing his cool in the trailer, which is another scene that I really, really liked, when he gives that performance as the bad guy kind of after his pep talk. And it's just, like, a long monologue from some like shitty Western TV show that like out of universe we have no reason to care about. But the fact that he does that monologue and he nails it, and that, I also really liked his back and forth with the girl, with the child actor, and she tells him, kind of gives him that validation, like the younger like guard, like affirming that he still has it as he's like, on the verge of tears, like that was the best performance I've ever seen. I mean, it was some real powerful shit to me that really resonated, especially like with kind of that meta element, but even without, like, I just think that like as a piece of acting, like Leo's doing great work. I fucking love Leo. And yeah, so I think that's the kind of masturbatory element that I think really, really works And it's the sort of thing that I'm willing to go along with all the feet for.
Yeah, that's fair. As I said, like, I think the problem is like, I feel like I'm gonna end up, for the most part, just circling the drain on this one of saying, yes, I see where you're coming from. I think that you are correct, but it did not land for me because I don't have as much of an attachment to Quentin Tarantino. I think there's a lot of things. Fuck it, man. There's a lot of things about this movie I like, but also I just doesn't land for me because I just don't know Quentin Tarantino. Yeah, no, like, that's really the whole. We're halfway through the episode. And I've just stated my thesis for like the 6th time. Sorry, but that's what you're gonna hear. I do. I'm gonna just jump in here really quick though, while I still have something like coherent and not stupid to say. And just say, like, I think, just from a visual standpoint, from a visual medium, as to how a lot of these shots were structured, and more so in kind of the consistency between scenes and ideas. I felt a little bit lost at points. Because the movie definitely, as we've said, has some Tarantino-isms behind it, and, you know, I'm not talking about the feet. I'm talking about, like, just, hey, I'm going to, you know, jokingly draw on the screen and be like, this is the main character talking about me as, you know, I'm doing things and stuff, and, you know, be very aware of the movie and breaking the fourth wall. Those scenes all kind of felt out of place for me, mostly because they were really few and far between. And that's not to say, like, the scene of Leo in The Great Escape felt out of place, because that felt it was interwoven with the story in a very natural way. And I felt like the cutting away to shots of clearly him just being like, I want to make an Italian movie, but I don't have enough of a idea for an Italian crime movie to actually make one. I'm just gonna do this. Was really cool. I liked that. I thought that was fun. I don't know if that's actually what happened, but, like, that's what I was thinking of when I watched this. Is like, a lot of these, I'm like, this feels like something that you might do if you're like, I want to take that shot set up, but I don't really know what I want to do with it. Like, I thought that interstitial stuff was a lot of fun and really cool, and I was really into it. But, like, when they would all of a sudden start drawing on the screen, or mostly it was the drawing on the screen, or like weird interludes that felt strange and out of place to me, just because they only happened like once or twice. And I think it goes even beyond, because, like, if it was just once, I'd say, yeah, okay, it was, you know, a goofy thing that they might have been in. Like, Scott Pilgrim is a good example of this for me, where it would just kind of like do one-off throw-off gags that never really came back or resurfaced. But, like, the fact that there would be 2 of them was just the right amount to make me a little uncomfortable in the fact that it didn't really continue throughout, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think this kind of chalked down to, like, an aesthetic preference. This is another thing that I mean when I say, like, you kind of gotta get on board with, like, the Tarantino mindset, or just, like, say, whatever, like, I'm not really into it. Because for me, I really like, in general, when films kind of do that, have kind of the confidence to just include weird little things that aren't necessarily a running theme. Like, Wolf of Wall Street, Scorsese does it in that movie, too, where there'll just be, like, a shot or a convention or, like, a fourth wall break that you kind of expect to be a recurring element that never comes back. And I think it kind of contributes to that chaotic sort of freeform pacing. And I think that having those little like interludes do give the film a lot of personality and sort of like pump up maybe some of the slower parts. But I mean, I can see why the inconsistency would be bothersome.
But, like,
and
once again, here's the thing, is that in The Wolf of Wall Street, you said it yourself, they're one-shots. I'm talking about the things that come back, like, exactly twice. And, like, polar opposite ends of the movie. They're not, like, they're not effective bookends, per se, but they're just kind of weird dangling things. Like, it's as I said, it's the 2 that bothers me. It's the fact that it's not consistent enough to be a pattern, but also not isolated enough to be a weird one-off.
Oh, that's fair. I got it. I struggle to think of other examples off the top of my head. I feel like there are other films I enjoy that utilize a similar construction. I can't think of like an exact one-to-one comparison. Like I'm trying to think of what happens in Wolf of Wall Street right now, but I'm not coming up with anything. But no, that's fair. And it's definitely, I think it is definitely another element of the Tarantino jerk-offening of like, I'm gonna do this thing.
That's the worst Highlander movie.
Everything about a Tarantino movie, basically, this is my thesis, is very masturbatory. And really, it's all about confidence in this world, man. You just gotta have the confidence to pull it off. That's how we got so far.
Where do we want to go from here?
So I want to talk about, I've touched on why I think that Leo's character is so effective. I want to talk about Cliff for a bit.
Well, before we do, have I mentioned that I think that my problem with this movie is that I just am not familiar with Quentin Tarantino enough?
No, Sean, I don't think you've mentioned that.
Okay, well, let's divest into that for a little bit for a second. No, talk about Cliff, please. Please, stop me from talking.
So, Brad Pitt, our co-lead, our buddy in this buddy comedy, I guess.
Question marks on both of those.
Yeah. So, he's the stunt double for Leo, and also like a big super badass who was like in a war, and like, there's kind of some hand wavy things, mostly so we can have a cool action scene at the end, because of course we have a cool gory action scene at the end of a Tarantino movie. Wouldn't be a Tarantino movie without it. So, I really, if I have a big criticism of the movie, it's this. And it's not so much like a filmmaking, writing, theme criticism, and more of just like a cultural, ideological, time and place sort of weirdness. And it's this. So Cliff's plot is basically that he's Leo's stunt double, and he's got kind of a shady past. The film never really makes it clear one way or another if he actually did kill his wife. But between, sort of the rumors about him, just his general kind of sleazy behavior, and the fact that he causes trouble on sets, he's been kind of blacklisted for being a stunt double. And Leo, one of sort of the underlying things is that Leo wants to do right by his buddy, but in a lot of ways Cliff is a liability. And however, Cliff ends up being kind of vindicated. He handles the situation at the Manson Ranch, pretty well. Blows everyone the fuck out with his good doggo when they try to commit the famous Manson family murders.
I am so happy that dog made it. Just as a quick aside, that dog was adorable.
I was on the edge of my seat. That was the biggest tension. I really wanted Brandy. I can't remember. Brandy, that's it. Yeah. So, great dog. And and so so he gets his big vindication moment, and this is very clearly established in the last shot, where where Leo is talking to the actual victims of the real life historical murder after Margot Robbie's character and everyone surrounding her.
Oh, I want to talk about that for a second. We'll come back to it. Put a pin in that.
Yeah, definitely. And so Leo goes over and he's having a conversation. It says earlier in the movie, I live next to Roman Polanski. And this could be a big deal. This could be the restart of my career. One pool party is all I need. And this, he goes and he makes those connections. And ultimately, Leo, sticks by his friend. He's a stunt double. A very underappreciated role in Hollywood that nonetheless, is required for films to be made. Everyone needs to do their part, even if they don't get the glitz and the glamour of it. And I think that's all great stuff. I think that's all like a good point. However, the fact that the director that Rick is trying to curry favor with, being Roman Polanski, is very telling and introduces some questions because of the Me Too movement and like the Hollywood culture of like famous people getting away with doing horrible things, and this thing about accountability, because of course Roman Polanski like basically all but like legally confirmed have gotten away with rape, like can't come back to the US. And now the fact that personally the fact that the movie doesn't really deal with Polanski, I'm fine with that because that was the historical background that we're basing the movie on, and like it's
not really about him is what it boils down to.
I don't necessarily need a thing about that. However, his presence does sort of raise that kind of discomfort about like, you know, who we sort of vouch for and like who we let like get away with things, and that makes a lot of the situation around Cliff's character like a little uncomfortable. Even like especially because it is so ambiguous about what like happened with his wife, but even if it wasn't, and even if it was like an accident and he was completely cleared of it, I mean that's just not like that still brings up the message of like, well, you know, we gotta like, you know, believe the put upon people who are like having these false accusations and rumors spread about them, which is, you know, obviously not a great look considering what's going on right now.
It's kind of a we in Hollywood support our own type of thing, like don't fucking talk.
Yeah, and which is and it's especially uncomfortable because like not that I've heard like any particularly like Harvey Weinstein tier things about Tarantino, but they're definitely like Uma Thurman has come out and like talked about a lot of the kind of troubling things that were going on set. So it's definitely
weirdly sexual things of feet in his movies.
Yeah,
there's something weird there.
So I'm just left sort of thinking. I'm torn because on the one hand, I think that like outside of the context of Hollywood, that story about like, you know, loyalty and, you know, kind of that, I mean, and even within Hollywood, like the spirit of collaboration and like needing everyone to kind of play their part, and even if they're not appreciated, I think that's all like very good and stuff that you don't really see in a ton of movies, since so much of it is about the glitz and the glamour and the stardom. And I mean, like thinking about it now, saying it this way, I mean, I can see why like you would give Cliff kind of this edge just from like an on paper storytelling perspective, because you don't want his character to be boring and uninteresting if he's just like a good guy that gets shit on. Like that's not very exciting either. But on the other hand, it's just that plot element with the particular climate that's going on in Hollywood right now. I mean, it's dubious to say the least.
So I'm gonna say a couple things here, and they kind of slide into each other, and it's not going to be the best look for myself, but it's also gonna be one of those things where like I feel like I'm gonna back it up well enough that like just bear with me on this.
Sure.
I wonder how a female audience would perceive Tarantino's movies. Now I'm gonna put that out there as this is a failure of me not thinking about this until this exact moment, so I did not have any time to do pre-research for it, because this is the type of thing that I absolutely should have done pre-research for, and as a follow-up, am going to go do some research into like female critics of this movie, because I'm very curious as to hear their opinions of it. Just seeing like the weird feet thing that goes on with it. Like I was uncomfortable with it, but I'm curious, you know, even more as a woman, is this very objectifying and uncomfortable to watch. So I am very curious about that. That said, I want to slide into a discussion of Sharon Tate and Margot Robbie, who there was a lot of guff early on around this movie about how Margot Robbie didn't get a whole lot of lines in it. Despite being Sharon Tate, which is, if you understand the Charles Manson story, what a lot of this was about. But I think now that more of the general audience has seen the movie, I think it's really interesting understanding that basically Margot Robbie and Sharon Tate was a red herring throughout this entire movie. Like, she wasn't supposed to have lines. She was there for people who understand the story, be like, okay, well, she's gonna die. We know what's happening here. And then, just kidding, they went in the wrong house. So I think I just want to say, like, I think it's kind of an interesting bit of discourse around this movie and kind of seeing how it evolved from not seeing the movie and kind of going like, oh, this is interesting. I'm curious to, see why people think this. Like, should she have had a bigger role? I've seen the movie now. The discourse is kind of weird in that angle. Did they kind of, like, I feel like there was a point, like, I try not to do a whole bunch of reading into the discourse around movies until I've seen the movie. So as of right now, I'm still kind of speaking from an uninformed position, and I'm just trying to stress this as much as I can, that I am in pure conjecture mode. I'm going to do research on this. I saw this movie earlier today. I've been very busy lately. So, like, I'm sorry I came into this without my usual level of research. But I just want to put it out there as I'm kind of curious on that front. Plus, I think it opens up for interesting discussion.
Yeah, so I got regarding how women perceive Tarantino's movies based on all that I have read. I'm pretty sure like entire books have been written about this very subject, because it's not completely black and white. There are a lot of like prominent female characters, not so much in this movie, granted, like throughout Tarantino's work, like you could argue like Brad Pitt and all that group of Nazi hunters, like they're seen as like the main characters, but arguably the French lady who owns the cinema in that movie is the main character. Obviously we have Kill Bill, so there's it wouldn't be an easy issue to parse out, I don't think. And I was actually curious about the same thing in my very cursory level curiosity about what people were saying. From the with a particular eye, I was looking at who was kind of giving the movie like more negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and I was interested in seeing like if that correlated with gender. It didn't seem to, from what I saw. Like the negative reviews seem pretty split between men and women critics. Obviously, like I didn't crunch the numbers or anything out of the total.
You didn't make a graph for us?
I didn't make a graph for us. Maybe I should have.
Jackson, God, we talk about this every week.
You know me. I'm known for my love of numbers and graphs. Master of fine arts in English. That's definitely a can of worms. Sure, a lot of people will be writing about and will continue to write about. However, regarding the historicity of the movie, this ended up being like one of the things I had to sort of like think about again, because Sharon Tate was like, obviously I had heard of the like Manson family murders, but like Sharon Tate was not a name that immediately like rung a bell for me. And like, so Margot Robbie's character, I was like sitting there watching the movie, kind of wondering where her scenes were going. And then like when, cause I forgot that this was going to be about Charles Manson in one way or another. And so when they first said Charlie, like at the ranch, I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Oh, that's what this is about. And so so that kind of foreshadowing or red herring was completely lost on me.
It's very weird because like as you're talking about this, it's one of those things where I really wouldn't have realized this had I not been on Twitter following like film Twitter's discourse about this. Like I would not have made the connection with Sharon Tate myself either. And like the only reason I knew that that was going on was because of film Twitter being like, it's Sharon Tate. And, you know, if you don't know the story between her and Charles Manson, I'm like, okay, so I mean, that kind of explains everything because I know who Charles Manson is.
Right.
So it's weird.
And so like the fact that the movie like you know, obviously the movie alters history and that they go into the wrong house and get blown the fuck out by Cliff and is a good doggo. So I mean, I think that's a very interesting choice. And like the fact that they sort of change houses due to like a professed like hatred of like film and the media and like movie stars for like poisoning their brains. And I mean, it would be very Tarantino of him to like again like kind of do the, you know, masturbation filmmaker thing of like, fuck y'all for like, you know, blaming the horrors of the world on movies. I'm gonna make a terrible action scene about you. That's a very Tarantino thing to do. And so like the fact that he changes history like this, I don't know. I'm still not quite sure what to make of it. Why it had to be specifically like a retelling or a revision of actual historical events as opposed to just the same themes but a fictionalized version. Yeah, I don't have an answer.
I think the red herring is a part of it, honestly.
Definitely.
Like, I think it works really well if you're more familiar with, you know, Sharon Tate and Charles Manson, but like it's reaching a point here in history where a lot of people aren't anymore. Like Charles Manson, the name still lives in infamy and rings a bell for most people, especially because like murder mystery or murder podcasts are really big right now, and like serial killers are all fascinating in the zeitgeist, which that's a whole thing to dive into unto itself. But Sharon Tate has kind of fallen by the wayside for a lot of people, I feel like. So it's an interesting decision, and there's a lot of things to parse about it. And unfortunately, we can't parse all those all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to Beating a Dead Horse. We won't answer your questions.
Well, I think it's interesting that like the movie, I mean, maybe this is just like a work of like tribute to Sharon Tate, maybe the fact that like culturally maybe that is kind of the point, is that she has been kind of forgotten.
What a wonderful tribute to show her feet.
I mean, in Tarantino's mind, that's the greatest tribute of all, I think. But like the fact that she, that her name is not as recognizable or iconic as Charles Manson. That like sure, like everyone in Hollywood probably like knows the story. Like that's you know, if you're very involved in that community, then yeah, like I'm sure that everyone who is an actor or a filmmaker like would know the name instantly. But like your average movie-going audience, especially if they're younger, I mean, I don't know. I didn't even I know a decent amount about the Manson murders. It still didn't ring a bell with me. So yeah, like maybe just the fact that like, you know, putting her kind of front and center, feet first, like just the fact that like the movie tries to make her character and makes her a real character, and puts her back in the conversation, whereas like Charles Manson, you know, they call him Charlie, but they never come out and say his name. Like it's only like I said, it took me a minute to realize that we were talking about the Manson family here, because I had forgotten that was kind of the pitch behind the movie. So by like, are we doing kind of the like is it exploitative? Is it an act of like raising up a victim and trying to remember them? You know, maybe it's a little of both.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we're getting an answer on this one.
I really like this movie the more that I talk about it. Fuck.
The more I talk about it, I nothing changes. I want to like it more. I really do. I don't know. It just, as a newbie to Quentin Tarantino, it just didn't land in the way that I hoped it would. That's really, joking aside, like, it is one of those things where I did want to like this movie more than I did. I was hoping, I hadn't really watched a Quentin Tarantino movie before, just because, you're influenced by your parents' tastes, and my dad often said that he was a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino, so I just never sought them out. It was just one of those things that was kind of in the back of my mind of like, I should watch them, especially once I got to college and met Jackson, a huge Quentin Tarantino fan, but I just never got around to them. So I was kind of hoping this one would be like, oh, fuck, yes, give me more of this. And it didn't.
So
I mean, I will say, I am going to go watch another one. I want to see more, but it didn't ignite me in the way I wanted it to.
That's a good segue. If you are in Sean's position, and somehow, or if you've never seen a Tarantino movie and somehow gotten all the way to the end of this, here's I think the best 3 films to start with. I think any one of them will do. Reservoir Dogs, his first like fully directed feature, still a really tight, really cool, really great, exciting thriller that I think, it was his first movie, and since Tarantino's so up his own ass about his canon or whatever, a reasonable enough place to start. Barring that, it's maybe not the most representative, so I'd say after that either Pulp Fiction or Inglourious Bastards. Inglourious Bastards is much more like with his sort of modern like sensibilities, like how he's changed, but I think it's a good mix between his concerns about actual like themes, also with his style and like hallmarks. I think it's just a really enjoyable movie. That's a good starting point. And Pulp Fiction is just iconic. You should watch it anyway. But it's the big one. So you can't really go wrong with that, even though it's not my favorite. So yeah.
And there you have it. Where to watch Quentin Tarantino?
Actually, none of those are my favorite Tarantino movie. My favorites are actually Django and Hateful Eight, as I think I said. But I wouldn't recommend someone starting with either of those.
Well, there you go again. Where to start watching Quentin Tarantino. So I'll go check out some of those at some point. I got a lot of movies I gotta watch because we're doing a lot of recording this week. Not to, open up what we're doing too much, but we got a lot going on.
Fun.
I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. I don't know why I'm whispering this, but I should just it's just between you and me, This is our little secret. You can also find my Twitch page at twitch.tv/Opus_Skippy. It's a good place to, go watch me stream. Jackson's there a lot. You can also read my work on 25yearslatersite.com, but you should post that to other people too. I was going to say don't tell anybody, but you should. You should tell everyone about that. It's good stuff. Shh.
I've been Jackson Keller. You can find me under Sean's floorboards, I think, soon enough. Help. But all jokes aside, you can find me at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. I've been streaming the new Fire Emblem and live streaming my playthrough. I'm moving soon, actually, so I might not be able to be too active for the next not the next week, but the week after that. But then once I'm all settled in, I'll be back and better than ever and finally ready to unveil some of those projects I've been hinting at. And so look forward to that.
Fuck yes. I am so excited. I am in the dark as to what most of these projects are going to end up being like as a finished product, and I'm very excited to start to get into them. Give them to me.
Daddy.
And if you'd like to keep updated as to when those projects go live, I'm going to tweet about them from our fucking podcast Twitter account, because of course I am. Why wouldn't I? So go follow that at BADH_cast on Twitter. It's also where I post updates that, when like new bonus episode comes out, new unscheduled episodes, and also like if we have to cancel a week, which we do every now and again. It's pretty rare though. I think we've only missed one in like the past like 6 months. So like we're fucking nailing it so far. If you want to get in contact with us more directly, though, you can join our Discord by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/BADHcast. There's no underscore on that one because my consistency is shit. So you should do that. It's $1 a month. That is super fucking cheap, and you can come talk to us directly, yell at us for our bad takes about Quentin Tarantino, and in this case specifically my bad takes about Quentin Tarantino. You can also at $5 and $10 a month get access to our bonus episodes, which are all been really good lately, so listen to those. There's also a bonus episode from our 100th episode spectacular, and at the $10 subscription you can even tell us what you want us to talk about next. You also
get a special shout out if you're one of our lovely stallions. Thank you so much, Julia Travis, Mom, and Aunt Summer. Thank you so much. And as pretty soon, can I announce what our next bonus episode is here?
Absolutely.
Go
for it.
So speaking of requests, my lovely Aunt Summer proposed that we talk about 1980s B-movie schlock film Night of the Comet. The whole movie is on YouTube, so if you want to watch it in preparation, that's what I'm going to do. So get hyped. It's going to be a wacky discussion, I think.
I'm really excited about it. I know almost nothing about this movie, so it should be fucking sick, because 80s trash science fiction is my jam.
This is like my family's OG, so bad it's good movie. My mom used to meme about this when I was a child, even, so it's not just my aunt.
I am so fucking excited. With that said, though, thank you to 25yearslatersite.com for the endorsement. They're great people doing a bunch of really great writing. And I'm not just talking about myself, because there's a bunch of people way more talented than I am doing even better writing. So please go support them. Give them your clicks. Go hang out and read their stuff. There's news, there's movies, there's video games, there's TV. There's more. Go click on them. And while you're there, you should leave that site to go to Spotify and listen to Lords of the Highway, because they let us use their theme song. It's Suicide Alternate Take off the My Octane Low Expectations. Ooh, or here's what you do. You listen to that song while being on 25yearslatersite.com. I did it. I fixed it. I salvaged that.
Technology is amazing. Did you know you could have two tabs open at once?
What a concept. I didn't. Thank you for sharing that. Next week, we're going to be talking about Hobbs and Shaw.
Get hype.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go